The Xeen T1.5 cinema lens, the OG, still worth buying in 2021? Hello friends, Jeremy Burchard here with another episode of Gear Talk, which is basically where we go behind the scenes of all of the different music and video that we produce as Moonlight Social, as well as my work as a cinematographer and director. If you like these videos, if you find them helpful, please give us that old thumbs up down there. And hey, if you want to just kiss on the first date, go ahead and subscribe and click that little bell notification. There'll be more videos like this coming soon, as well as more of the actual content that we shoot so you can see everything that I'm talking about in real practice. Excellent. Let's get on with the video. This is the Xeen 85mm T1.5 cinema lens in the Canon EF mount. When Rokinon/Samyang first released these in 2015, they were an absolute revelation to filmmakers everywhere. But that was over 5 years ago. How are these holding up now? And should you still look at picking some up in 2021? Traditionally, cinema lenses are a lot more expensive than photography lenses, and that is because they are designed for use with cinema cameras. The way they are built gives you a lot more of the manual control that you need as a cinematographer, a first AC, to really get the types of footage that you're going for with a cinema setup. Some of the biggest differences, obviously, include huge focus rings with a really wide degree for pulls, nice buttery smooth pulls. You've got declicked aperture, as well as usually a lot faster lenses, meaning they open up a lot wider. So, like as a T1.5, super wide, super fast lens. Huge front diameters, but they're consistent, right? Lens set diameters are consistent for use with matte boxes. And then also, these things are just like built like a tank. They are meant to last for years of constant use, which you necessarily can't always say with photography lenses. And the thing about cinema lenses is you pay for it. You pay for all of those extra features. Most cinema lens sets cost the price of like a micro budget full film. They're very, very cost prohibitive to a lot of filmmakers. So people end up renting them instead of buying them. You do what you can to make it work. So when the Xeens came out with all of the features of these big cinema lenses, but at a much more reasonable price point, like $2,500 when they first came out, and now they're down to averaging like $1,500 per lens, it was a big deal. And it didn't really take long for a lot of DPs and filmmakers and YouTubers to sing their praises. Yes, the glass inside of these lenses is still largely similar to the Rokinon's smaller plastic cine lens set, but it's great glass. People love that glass. It's all of the extra features that you're getting with a cinema lens setup that people really loved about them. So I personally own the 85mm as well as the 24mm, and I've used the 50mm and the 14mm and a couple of the others. So this is going to be kind of a rundown of how these lenses, shake down on set, real world use of them over the past couple years, kind of pros and cons. And then we could talk about whether or not they're still a great buy in 2021. So the 24mm pretty much lives on my Ursa Mini Pro. I'd say I shoot at least 80% of any given project at 24mm, which is, pretty standard for film and television work. On a Super 35 sensor, the 24 gives you a very comfortable field of view. It's wide enough that you can get all the action, but also has a good enough minimum focus range that you can get in close, get some of those nice kind of filmic shots without distorting the subject too much. And then the 85mm I use more sparingly, but pretty consistently still on every shoot. It's great for getting excellent separation of, the subject and the background. It's great for those kind of more artistic and dramatic punch-ins. And like I said, I've used the 50mm, 14mm, most of the range of these available lenses. And I can pretty much say that they are consistent across the board in terms of pros and cons. So there's not like a huge outlier, It's like all of this applies to everything except the 50mm. They're pretty much consistent across the board. So yeah, this is much less of like a technical spec review and more of just a how do these lenses hold up in the real world kind of review. So let's start with the most important question. How do they look? For lack of a more eloquent response, they look great. The image quality on these lenses is solid. Very nice bokeh. The glass is consistent. There's not a ton of breathing when you do focus pulls. No artifacts to really, notice. Lens flares are nice. It's a spherical lens, so they're not crazy, but they're nice and consistent. It's a good image lens. It's a great image lens, to be honest, especially for the price point. But there are some important things you need to know about this lens. For one, it's rated as a T1.5, which is a very fast lens. I rarely shoot with these lenses at a T1.5 just because they tend to get a little bit softer there. And I'll typically stop them down to like a T2 to T2.8, and they just sharpen up dramatically. The softness isn't terrible at the 1.5. In some ways, it can help you achieve a look you might be going for. But in most cases, I like to add softness elsewhere. And at a T2 to 2.8, these lenses are super sharp, and it makes it way easier for yourself or your AC to pull focus. That being said, I can give you a real world example where we were on set in a pitch black environment without our lighting rig. It was an outdoor rural scene. We were going for this eerie moonlight look, and I pretty much had to squeeze every last drop of light I could out of these lenses. So I shot wide open, and honestly, they performed great. The softness kind of added to the vibe, right? But that's a very specific situation. In most cases, if I'm able to control the light and I can afford to lose, half a stop to a stop of light at the aperture level, I'm going to do it just because it makes them so much sharper. The lenses across the board also have a slight green tint to them, especially in the skin tones. Most lenses have some sort of color tint. You'll get some leaning green or magenta in certain ways. Most people are aware of them either before they buy them or right after they first use them and get into post. Or in some cases, that's the reason they want the lens in the first place, right? People will get a certain set of lenses because of the way they handle colors. You can actually tell too, like if your camera has auto white balance and you balance these, you will almost always see your camera adjust the tint a couple points, 10 to 15 points towards magenta. I typically don't use auto white balance. I'll kind of like to settle it like a 4500 Kelvin with a 0 on the tint, and then adjust in post if I need to. Because I know these lenses are gonna give me a little bit of green, and if I'm not going for that, I'll just correct it in post and I'll get a nice neutral color. And then, we'll end up grading them however they want. Very little of my work ends up being like true Rec 709 color form, right? All of the stuff usually ends up having a vibe and a look to it. Clients typically want that. I typically like that with our own work. So it's just something to be aware of, the green tint, which is, like I said, is pretty consistent across all of the focal lengths of these lenses. Other than those two things, being a little bit soft, wide open, and having a slight green tint, the value of these lenses, the quality of the image, the solidness of the build, the reliability is top notch. These lenses are crazy affordable for the amount of actual quality you get from them. But it's been 5 years. Surely there have been some new competitors on the market. Maybe there's a better buy than this lens out there right now. It's interesting though, because there haven't really been a whole lot of competitors entering the market to challenge Xeen at this price point. You've got DZO Film coming out with some lenses that are close, but have some key differences in the near future. You've got the Zeiss Compact Prime series, which are still 2 to 3 times as much as these, so I wouldn't necessarily consider that a competitor for price point anyways. And then you've got Xeen itself kind of competing by releasing the carbon fiber pro version of these lenses, which are a little more expensive, nothing crazy, but they're lighter. The diameter is smaller, so all of these have 114 millimeter diameter, which is pretty standard for matte boxes. The pro versions have 95 millimeter diameter. They cut the weight like in half, I think. The focus ring markings are like glow in the dark neon green. A bunch of little stuff that honestly I did not ultimately decide was worth upgrading from this lens to that lens. So those are kind of like the main competitors. If I miss one, please let me know in the comments. So that brings us back to the main question. Is it still worth picking up the Xeen T1.5 cinema lenses over 5 years after their release? The short answer, in my opinion, is yes. If you're looking to make the jump to cinema lenses, it's an obvious choice. If you're looking to fill out part of your kit that you might, be missing a certain focal length, but you don't have a huge budget, also an obvious choice. These lenses, because they were first, are still in really high demand. And if you do decide to sell them, the resale value is still there, depending on what you picked it up for. And in a lot of ways, because no major defects or, product-wide problems have emerged over these past 5 years, people are committed to holding on to them. They're great lenses. They really are. 2021, I would have absolutely no problem picking up more of these lenses. They last. They get a great image quality. When you know the pros and cons, you know how to work them properly, it's hard to find a better value still 5 years later than these Xeen Cine lenses. I hope that was helpful. Please feel free to let me know if you want to know more about the lenses themselves. Obviously, there's a lot of footage in this video from different projects that I've done, both for Moonlight Social and for some other clients. This is all real world stuff. Happy to answer any questions in the comments. Thank you guys. And yeah, I think these videos are gonna keep getting better. So hang with me, stick with me, and we're gonna make some good content. Thanks, you guys.